This individual is named Kangeoma. He appears to be an ordinary, average guy. However, the truth is that he was actually reincarnated into this, a world that is truly his favorite game. He is about to take the entrance exam for the Nobles Academy. Everyone here is wealthy, while he is just struggling financially. On the very first day he went to register his sword, the professor completely lost control. The guy had to be one of the seniors orchestrating a major prank, but the kid stood his ground. These are his blades. He is financially struggling, and his family cannot afford the tuition. The professor then noticed the green badge on the uniform. It was a student who gained entry through a special admission test. The professor became emotional over the child's determination. The other wealthy students were certainly not on board with it. When they learned that someone was admitted through a special program due to their financial situation, they began complaining that the atmosphere was unpleasant. Despite the extremely hostile atmosphere, Gioma remained unfazed. In his previous life, he never succeeded in living a relaxed life. This time, he's determined to make it happen. He is youthful and attractive. Despite awakening a rare ability, it has an unusual catch. He can only use swords that are under 30 centimeters. Talk about a limitation. When he tested his newly awakened ability, the power was incredibly intense. He felt a surge of lightning shoot through the sword and resonate throughout his entire body. The pain of activating it is overwhelming. If it's always like this, he'll never want to use it again. But perhaps it's just like the first time with girls. However, testing his abilities once more, the pain felt exactly the same. Nearby, people were gathering for the ceremony that would determine the students' ranks. All the young talents were present. Sitting right at the top was one of the 7 legendary heroes. Siegfried von Nibelung is a disciple of Yu Kim, the Academy's founding hero. All the students are aware of this and admire it. However, the bored old man was not pleased. Not even the arrival of another one of the 7 heroes could lift his spirits. The girl, whose curves were more legendary than her title as the Sage of the 7 Heroes, greeted the old man. The girl's name is Medea, and Siegfried ridicules her for being 70 years old while dressing like a young person. The Medea didn't view it as an offense. In fact, she considered it a compliment. She also mentioned that if Siegfried accepted her blessing, he would appear 10 years younger. The old man declines. The elderly must come to terms with their nature. Medea has a youthful essence, which is why she appears that way. Despite the old man's insults, the girl accepted the invitation to attend the Academy's first day. She once despised these people, yet she accepted them regardless. She is curious to meet Siegfried's granddaughter. The gathered students resembled a vibrant sea of colors with their dyed hair, while Gioma stood out as the only one with black hair. The jokes about his lack of nobility continued unabated. Everyone forgot about him when a girl arrived. Her blue hair and captivating aura made the guys blush deeply. Siegfried's granddaughter, the Sword Emperor. The girl is named Abel von Nibelung, and she serves as the main heroine of this game. The exam was about to begin. One of the ancient heroes established a realm within the Academy known as the subspace. In this place, anyone can be injured or eliminated, but when they return to reality, their bodies remain unharmed. That's why all methods of combat are permitted, including lethal ones. Siegfried and the Medea claim it's an Academy tradition. The students who endure the longest achieve the highest ranks. The 2 elderly individuals were intrigued by the exceptional student. However, the other students were now focused on the student with unique attributes. Gioma could have been one of the guys joining the herd in pursuit of Abel. However, he understands the truth about this girl and her miraculous blessing. As everyone follows their pheromones, he goes in the opposite direction. He's even reading a book about living a peaceful life in this world. He also recalls that to succeed here, he will need to rely on that pesky ability. When the announcement was made that everyone would be sent to subspace, they were all excited. Except for Gioma. However, when it occurred, he was resolute. After 7 minutes, several students were sent back, leaving everyone shaken by the intensity of the eliminations. The media closely observed and reported that Abel secured first place. Most people found this predictable, considering her well-known family. She was thrilled to witness the performance of Siegfried's granddaughter. However, Siegfried had a different perspective. He noted that she hadn't broken the Academy record that he had held for a long time. Just as the old man was about to depart, An intense, overwhelming sensation struck him like a sharp pain in the stomach. Everyone in the arena sensed it. The students gazed up at the sky, filled with fear. When the media asked Siegfried if he was aware of what was happening, even the great hero was unaware. Suddenly, the sky itself started to fracture. It was an astonishing sight. Two individuals suddenly fell from the sky and crashed to the ground, plunging the arena into a deathly silence. Media outlets instructed medical teams to quickly attend to the injured students. The story then shifts back a few minutes earlier. While the students were meant to be fighting each other, it was, in fact, a pair of brothers who were overpowering everyone else. Due to these two, the match felt predetermined from the outset. It wasn't a fair contest. It was a death match. Gyoma was well aware of who was responsible for the violence. The sinister twins, Mao Jun and Sun Mao, were two brothers with an innate talent for brutality. For 30 minutes, they had been tormenting the weaker students, relishing the act of causing them pain. Gyoma appeared so frail that the twins initially overlooked him. Eventually, all of their victims had disappeared, leaving the brothers feeling bored and in search of a new target. They noticed a lone girl shivering in the back and pointed at her. It was evident they had malicious intentions. Gyoma decided he could no longer remain silent. As Sun Mao approached the frightened girl when he made a creepy comment about her being his type, Gyoma reached his breaking point. Gyoma shouted from the back, catching the twins' attention. He had jumped in without considering the consequences, and now the two boys who had previously ignored him were glaring at him. They noticed his unique admission name. They tagged him and laughed, calling him worthless. They chose to end his life swiftly so they could return to the girl. Confronting them directly, Gyoma contemplated his next move. His painless blessing lasted only 30 seconds, which was far too brief to defeat them. He understood that he had only one option remaining, and the solution lay within his bag of sashimi knives. However, he was aware that the moment he grasped a blade, his blessing would activate, and the unimaginable pain would return. He had longed for a safe, quiet life, but within just half a day, he found himself in danger. As he reached into his bag and pulled out a knife, causing both brothers to burst out laughing, Sun Mao resolves to stop wasting time and charges forward to take down Gyoma. This isn't a situation where Gyoma can afford to be choosy, but he has a desperate plan. He intends to use his painless blessing for 30 seconds to negate the pain from the sword god blessing. All he needs to do is endure. He activates his painless blessing just before drawing the sashimi knife. And once again, the blessing of the sword god comes to life, just as Sun Mao descends upon him with a wicked smile. Gyoma has only one way to survive this. If he can't navigate through the situation, he will perish. But can a sashimi knife actually cut through a person? He recalls asking his former master, an ex-gangster, why gangsters in movies always use them. His master replied that it was merely cinematic nonsense. He said, "You can't slash a person like a piece of fish, not even if a god descends. But the blessing is evident. If he desires it, he can sever it." Trusting in the blessing from his master, Gyoma lunges forward with his knife at the large man leaping toward him. In an instant, Sun Mao is sliced cleanly in half. The other students and Mao Jun, the remaining brother, stare in utter shock. The quiet, gloomy kid just achieved the impossible with a mere kitchen knife. Sun Mao's body collapses to the ground in two separate pieces. His brother screams. He desperately urges his mind to remember that this is subspace and that Sun Mao isn't truly dead. However, that doesn't alter what he just witnessed. Mao Jun reminds himself that his brother must have been careless. Now, as the surviving twin, he must take on the responsibility. He gazes at his brother's lifeless body and claims the power gauntlet for himself. When the gauntlet is equipped on both hands, its true power is unleashed. Mao Jun's defense has been enhanced. His jumping power has surged by 200%, and his punches pack a powerful punch. He is confident that not even an S-rank weapon can breach his defense now. However, Gyoma isn't paying attention to him at all. He's solely focused on the countdown, monitoring the seconds remaining before his blessing expires. Mao Jun spots an opportunity and lunges in for a sucker punch while Gyoma is distracted. And just like that, it's all over in an instant. Mao Jun lies on the ground, drenched in his own blood and barely clinging to life, as Gyoma completes his countdown. The instant it reaches 0, the painless blessing comes to an end. The full agony of the sword god's blessing hits him all at once. He screams, still gripping the knife. and ultimately collapses. Sometime later, Chioma awakens in a white room, likely a clinic of some sort. Before he can even rise, two people enter the room. Although he's never met them, he knows precisely who they are. Two of the legendary seven-star heroes, the mightiest among humanity, Siegfried and the director of the academy, Medea Poison. He can't help but wonder why two of the world's most powerful individuals are here to see him. Medea inquires about his name. Siegfried cuts to the chase, his hand nervously resting on his sword. He demands to know what Chioma has done. He explains that during the fight, they both experienced a strong sensation that was clearly triggered by him. The tension is so palpable, it feels like you could cut it with a knife. Recognizing that he is being targeted by the strongest man alive, Chioma makes a clever decision. He begins by apologizing, acknowledging that his actions went too far, and expresses his willingness to accept any punishment. As the two glare at each other, Medea intervenes before a fight can erupt. She tells Siegfried to stop intimidating the kid. Then, something shocking is revealed. While Chioma was unconscious, Siegfried actually cleaned his clogged meridians. Chioma can't believe the swordmaster would go to such lengths for him. However, upon checking, he realizes that his body feels significantly lighter. Medea explains that they reviewed the video and determined he was simply defending a female student in distress. She can't help but drool a little, referring to Chioma as the handsome prince she's always dreamed of, forcing Siegfried to bring her back. The key point, she explains, is that she won't criticize him for his actions. Moreover, the twins already had a poor reputation. Following Chioma's actions, both of them have decided to withdraw from the school. That's a tremendous relief for him. However, that's not everything. The true reason they visited him was to congratulate him on being the top scorer in the entire school. Just like that, Chioma's dream of a peaceful and safe life has become impossible. Later, in Medea's office, the two heroes reconvene. She's expressing concerns about something she has never encountered in her 2 decades as the head of the academy. A student secured the top position among all new candidates but declined the offer to join the prestigious star class at the school. They attempted to persuade him to reconsider, but Chioma remains unwilling. Medea inquires if Siegfried is upset that Gamma secured the top rank instead of his granddaughter. After all, he witnessed the video and recognizes her potential. However, Siegfried disagrees, viewing it as merely an immature child challenging the system. He claims that the subspace embodies the will of the founding hero. If the subspace acknowledges Chioma as number 1, then the academy has effectively designated him as the top student, and that status will remain unchanged. Siegfried has his own personal thoughts and views Chioma as someone entirely unfamiliar. If his skills were exceptional, his physical abilities impressive, or even if he had some experience, it would make sense. However, Siegfried could see that he possessed none of these qualities. However, as he observed in the video replay, Chioma moved with a remarkable sense of skill. It embodied the pinnacle of swordsmanship, a pursuit he had dedicated his entire life to. While unblocking Chioma's acupoints, he realized how weak his body was, having not yet undergone any physical training. However, it seemed that something within him was beyond the grasp of even the strongest human understanding. As a result, he's feeling an intense sense of competition with someone who is the same age as his granddaughter. Medea, however, is more captivated by his striking looks. She remains enchanted by the way he showcased his abilities to rescue a woman in peril. She jokes that if she were only 10 years younger, she would definitely pursue him. Lost in thought, Siegfried remains silent until she inquires about what's on his mind. He doesn't respond and eventually asks her what she believes students call people like her. Intrigued, the school administrator encourages him to continue. His response is certainly not what she hoped for, and she ultimately erupts in anger. Meanwhile, Chioma heads to his first class. He had declined the star class, so the highest level they could place him in was the wolf class. Any lower, and the elders would have thrown a fit. He initially wanted to join the tiger class, but Medea practically pleaded with him to enroll in the wolf class instead. In return, she promised to keep his status as the top student in the school a secret. He initially preferred to finish his studies comfortably, in a lower class rather than struggle in a higher one. The wolf class is somewhat advanced, but it still falls within the range he anticipated. Chioma pushes open the large doors and steps into his new classroom. For a moment, all the students gaze at him with mild curiosity. They then realize he is a special admission student. And just like that, no one seemed to care about him anymore. Gioma doesn't mind. The fact that they are ignoring him indicates that Medea has upheld her end of the bargain. Now, all he needs to do is embrace the peaceful life he has always envisioned. He sits at his desk as a familiar student approaches him nervously. She thanks him shakily for his previous help. However, Gioma has no idea who this person is. She clarifies that she is the girl he saved during the test. Gioma dismisses her gratitude, stating that she doesn't need to thank him. After all, he adds, anyone else in that situation would have acted similarly. It may seem as though he saved her, but he believes he did it primarily to save himself. Accepting her gratitude would make him feel like a hypocrite. Gioma shifts the conversation by introducing himself instead. The girl introduces herself as Chloe, noting the interesting coincidence of them ending up in the same class. With the introductions complete, Gioma reflects on whether he has ever encountered a character named Chloe in the game. Perhaps she was introduced after he stopped playing, but that doesn't add up. By the time he quit, the game's core narrative was already well established, making the introduction of a new character seem pointless. It seems he has encountered someone just like him. Gioma asks her to keep the exam incident a secret. He wants to prevent news of his abilities from spreading and disrupting his comfortable and uncomplicated life. Chloe agrees, but then begins to make a request of her, before being interrupted by their homeroom teacher, who burst into the room with a loud shout. Gioma asks her to return to her seat so they can talk later. The teacher, introducing himself as Lee Wan-bin, congratulates the newcomers in Wolf class. Since it's their first day, he plans to start with some basic physical exercises. 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and 100 squats, along with 10 laps around the training area. Essentially, it's a Saitama split. For the brilliant nobles who have undergone rigorous training throughout their lives, this is a breeze. For Jomei, this training regimen will undoubtedly lead to baldness. He nervously approaches the teacher after everyone else has left, and he says he doesn't feel strong enough for the training. Surprisingly, the teacher not only knows his name but also holds Jomei in very high regard. It seems that Medea didn't fully manage to conceal her impression of him. Lee Wanben is aware that Jomei can take classes at any level he chooses. However, he declines the chance to attend the star class and instead tells the teacher that he just wants to go to the restroom for now, and that's how Jomei is compelled to participate in the monotonous exercise alongside his classmates. They all effortlessly run past him. Although he is just slightly behind, he already feels as though he is about to pass out. Chloe runs up beside him and realizes he doesn't look so well. She unexpectedly informs him that she's already on her 9th lap and offers him a bit of encouragement. She then zooms off to finish her final task. By the end of the day, Joma returns to his dorm room and drinks several bottles of water. He has been at the academy for only a week and has already encountered unexpected challenges. After the intense training, he rushed to the cafeteria, only to discover that the meals weren't free. Upon seeing the price for a spicy pork rice, he froze in disbelief. Just recalling the price now makes him hurl his bottle against the wall in a fit of blind rage. He's nearly depleted his living expenses and deeply regrets not accepting the money his father offered him. For the past few days, he has been subsisting solely on the cheapest water from the campus shop. He even misses the complimentary dinners from his time in the army. For now, all he can do is focus on something else to distract himself from his hunger. The first thing that comes to mind is his approval. As always, the status screen appears, providing him with the details. It has become significantly longer since the last time. His physical abilities have improved, which has enhanced the blessing of the sword god, enabling it to activate with slightly longer swords. Now he examines himself in the mirror. Sure enough, it appears he has made significant physical progress. It's likely that the Swordmaster activated his pressure points, making it seem as if his body has evolved. However, the Sword God's blessing has yet to extend beyond the reach of a sashimi knife. If he continues to improve, perhaps one day he'll be able to wield a small sword. His hands even begin to itch when he isn't carrying a blade anymore, likely a consequence of the blessing. A knock sounds at the door. He opens it to find Chloe. However, she hasn't seen him in the cafeteria and came to check if he's okay. He claims he doesn't usually eat food prepared by others, but deep down, he practically salivates at the thought of it. Chloe appears disappointed, as she expresses her hope that they could have dinner together. Before she can complete her thought, Gioma is already dressed and urging her to follow him to purchase ingredients. Later that evening, the two enjoyed a delicious meal prepared by Gioma. Chloe is truly impressed. Having grown up near the beach and with a love for fish, her passion aligns perfectly with Gioma's expertise in cooking it. The urge to grab a knife still lingered, making it the perfect opportunity to hone his skills by slicing some sashimi. The issue lies with the sword, a blessing from God. He can't even hold a simple kitchen knife without it triggering. He asks Chloe if she has a larger knife, mentioning that it would be awkward to use his own weapons for cooking. She enters her room and returns with a large sword. Definitely much too large for a simple fish. With no other options, he is compelled to use his blessing. The painless blessing will last for 30 seconds, so he just needs to ensure he's quick enough. Once hailed as the greatest swordsman in his country, he has always excelled at cutting fish. Now, it's time for him to prove his skills. He expertly slices the fish, finishing in just 21 seconds and leaving 9 seconds of the painless blessing to spare. The entire experience was done so well that he would consider it a masterpiece. Chloe inquires about his cooking skills, and he admits that he previously worked part-time at a Japanese restaurant. As a noble, she doesn't grasp the concept of a part-time job. It clearly indicates that they come from different social backgrounds. Now that the meal is finished, Chloe offers to wash the dishes since he prepared all the food for them. He moves to the other side of the room to give her space to clean. For the first time in nearly a week, he feels full, and he can't help but hum with joy. The humming stops abruptly as Chloe accidentally drops a plate behind him. It's likely because she has never had to wash dishes before, and dropping plates is something he used to do at her age. As he gazes out the window, he tunes out the sound of plates shattering behind him. A book tumbles off Chloe's study desk. It appears to be a diary, and the book just happens to open to a page where she describes him saving her during the class placement test. Her handwriting is charming, featuring rounded shapes and stickers. He finds himself picking up the book and smiling at it. The wind from the window flips the pages of the book to another section where she describes meeting him in the same class and developing an interest in him. He thinks it's all really cute. He can't help but turn through more pages, admiring just how cute she is. He flips through a few more pages and spots his name again, accompanied by numerous pages filled with "I love you" written countless times. Another plate shatters and he turns to find Chloe staring at him with a blank expression. With a frightening gaze, she straightforwardly asks him if he has read her diary. Chloe's emotionless demeanor isn't new. It's rooted in her upbringing and serves as a self-defense mechanism. Heroes gain respect by vanquishing demonic beasts, which enhances their social standing and global reputation. However, within their stagnant ranks, some factions exploit the weak under the guise of authority. When the law fails to punish these abusers, another group emerges from the shadows to address the situation, and that group is known as the Odeidere Cecilia family. They are a family that upholds order and conducts assassinations. Known for operating in the shadows, they ultimately strive to lead toward the light. Members of the Odeidere family have been training for assassination since before they even reach their teenage years. Their emotions are suppressed, and they endure rigorous training to transform into flawless assassination machines. Chloe belongs to this blood-stained family, and she first stained her hands with blood at the age of 15. Throughout her life, she has been advised not to underestimate her abilities as an assassin, which has led to a heightened self-awareness. However, her relentless training gradually warped her true nature, casting a dark shadow over her heart. By the time her identity had eroded, only faint traces of emotion remained. Chloe eventually reached the age to enroll in the academy. Joaquin Academy is an institution where students are assigned to various classrooms according to their aptitude. Each student's talent is at least on par with that of a dragon or greater. However, members of the Auditor family, who flourished in the shadows, were relegated to the common class by their family's decree. That was the agreement between the family and the academy. She was instructed to stay undetected. Throughout childhood, the family restricted each individual's freedom. Chloe accepted her fate as an assassin without protest, convinced that nothing could change her destiny. That is, until the day she met someone she would always remember. As she stood there, vulnerable and defenseless, the two wicked brothers approached her. Someone who appeared to be the weakest person in the room stood up to defend her. Although death in the subspace battle royale is not real and poses no genuine risk, this boy still made an effort to protect her. Chloe had quietly come to terms with death and was awaiting her predetermined fate. She had long since abandoned futile struggles and had learned to behave in a meek and unobtrusive way. Yet somehow, thanks to the boy's intervention, it felt as though the sun had pierced through the clouds in her mind. She watched as the boy wielded his sword, not to assassinate, but to defend himself and protect her. The moment she saw him fighting for her, she recalled a children's fairy tale she had read aloud in secret under her pillow. The story recounts a princess trapped in a castle who is saved by a prince. As the memories of the fairy tale flooded her mind, a tingle spread through her chest, and her cheeks flushed red. This indescribable feeling within her was undoubtedly love. Now Gioma has committed the ultimate sin by delving into the private thoughts of this girl. As she glares at him, he attempts to hold his ground, but deep down, he knows he's in trouble. He attempts to understand how he ended up in this situation. Was it when he embraced the genuine feelings of a teenage girl, or perhaps the moment he naively followed her simply because she offered to feed him? No matter how, he ended up facing death itself, embodied in the form of a teenage girl. His top priority should be to get out of here. He shifts the conversation, remarking on how beautiful the moon is, before casually seeking a way to exit the room without losing his head. She interrupts him before he can finish his sentence and asks once more if he saw her diary. He attempts to downplay the situation, claiming he only noticed her reference book and praises the effort she invested in her studies. However, none of that flattery will save his life at this moment. He can hardly believe she caught him reading it in the first place, considering she was occupied with washing dishes while he was sneaking a glance. She has even abandoned the formal speech she previously used to address him. It's as if she has suddenly transformed into a completely different person. He insists that he didn't see it, but she continues to pester him until he finally admits that he did. The moment he utters those words, Chloe resolves that his life must come to an end. She draws the same sword she had previously offered him to cut the fish. Gioma surveys his surroundings and considers his options. We are currently on the 4th floor, so jumping out of the window isn't an option. The only way for him to leave is through the front door. However, Chloe certainly won't allow him to just walk out of here, at least not with all his limbs intact. She is indeed approaching him with the sword, and it seems his time is running out. He attempts to understand why she's suddenly behaving this way, and he can think of only one possibility. Her unblinking pupils and deep red eyes can signify only one thing. He's dealing with a classic yandere. However, considering her abrupt transformation from an adorable little strawberry to a fierce killer makes it even worse. She has a dual personality and exhibits yandere traits. Managing her yandere traits on her own is already challenging, but the addition of a dual personality disorder complicates matters even further. It seems her change in personality was triggered by him reading her diary. While this could be damaging, he's convinced that if he doesn't take action to snap her out of it, she'll continue to pursue him until the day he dies. He must find a way to secure his future by taking initiative today. Otherwise, his situation will only worsen. The only chance he has of making it out alive is by obtaining a weapon. However, he has only 9 seconds left after spending 21 seconds slicing the fish. His sashimi knife remains in his room, but he can use the kitchen knife from earlier. There's no way he can reach that without risking his arms getting severed. He glances around once more and spots a box cutter on her study desk. He has nothing else to use, but there's no way this tiny item is sufficient to activate the blessing of the sword god. Chloe finally charges at him with a sword, and it seems there's only one way to find out. He takes the box cutter and removes the blade. Numerous status screens appear before him. His resourcefulness in this situation enhances his mental resilience, granting him a temporary intimidation buff. The system then makes the necessary adjustments before activating the blessing. Chloe charges at him with her sword just as Gioma withdraws with the box cutter. Before she can strike, he remarks that her hair is a bit long. Thanks to the intimidation boost, Chloe freezes for a moment. Just as Gamma unleashes the blade, everything goes dark and blurry. By the time Chloe wakes up later in the evening, her room is dark, neat, and devoid of clutter. Her thoughts quickly turn to Gioma, and she wonders where he has gone. She calls out to him several times, but the silence confirms that she is alone in her room. The last thing she recalls is stealing glances at him as he gazed out her window, but everything beyond that is a blur. She suddenly feels the urge to search for her katana, but she notices it leaning against her study desk. She occasionally loses consciousness when she holds her katana, but it seems she managed to stay composed this time at least. That's what she believes. When she was younger and still refining her skills, she would lose consciousness while wielding her blade. By the time she regained awareness, her surroundings would be stained with blood, and her elders would dismiss her inquiries about what had happened during her blackout. They consistently reminded her not to underestimate her talent as an assassin. However, the inability to recall her actions with Gioma leaves her feeling embarrassed. She buries her head in her bed, overwhelmed with shame. However, that shame swiftly transforms into something different as she begins to think about Gioma. She then notices the box cutter lying on the floor. Additionally, her hair appears to be shorter. Inside her trash bin, she notices some of her hair neatly gathered. That's when she realizes he must have helped her cut her hair. She opens her journal to elaborate on her deep affection for him, exploring the nuances of her feelings and the ways they manifest in their relationship. Highlight the moments that define her love, the little gestures that speak volumes, and the profound connection they share. Gioma, in contrast, isn't nearly as lovesick as Chloe is at the moment. In fact, he can hardly believe he's even alive right now. Behind an unassuming wall on the far side of the college, he vomits the food he had just praised Chloe for providing him. He barely made it past the first 5 seconds after his 9 seconds of painless blessing ended. Even then, he still feels extremely unwell. After vomiting his only decent meal in over a week, Gioma sits on a bench and considers his next steps. Now he's hungry again and feels even worse than he did before Chloe's visit. His thoughts drift back to Chloe, and he begins to ponder who she really is. Her swordsmanship is clearly refined to take an opponent's life with a single strike, or, at the very least, to subdue them. Chloe wields her sword with precision, as if she is constantly targeting vital spots, suggesting her technique is tailored for assassination. If she had caught him off guard, Gioma definitely wouldn't have made it. Feeling that his life was in danger, he instinctively aimed for her neck. Fortunately, the knife was too short, so he only succeeded in cutting her hair. Before he left, he tidied up the mess, so there shouldn't be any issues later. However, this only reinforces the idea that maintaining his peaceful and safe life is not as straightforward as it seems. It appears that being ordinary is the most challenging task for him. When he was first thrown into this game, he certainly had ambition. In his previous life, he had mastered the art of using a sashimi knife to perfection. Thus, it wasn't easy for him to abandon his dreams. However, everyone has a role to fulfill, and in this world, he was summoned as a background character. The title of the game is Miracle Blessing, along with the name of the protagonist's blessing, which was also that of the founding hero, Balor Jaqen. Throughout the game, the protagonist and the founding hero were the only 2 individuals to possess this legendary blessing. The blessing's description was clear. They are tasked with saving the world from the Demon King. The protagonist is selected by Balmong, an SS sword that is both holy and cursed. Meanwhile, all Gioma possesses is a humble, rankless sashimi knife. There's little more to say. He seems destined for a life of obscurity. The continuous influx of remarkable individuals and situations he encountered since joining the academy nearly caused him to lose sight of his goal. There were many reasons to abandon the pursuit of a simple life, and it's even clearer now that it feels like there isn't a single normal person in the entire world. Having played the game before, he has a basic understanding of the key characters, but his knowledge of the world itself remains limited. It has already been a week since he joined the academy. This means the protagonist should have already awakened his blessing and started the late admission process. This is where the game's story truly begins. Gioma is familiar with the general plot, but he never completed it. For the first time, he genuinely regrets having quit halfway through. However, since he is familiar with the canon route up to the first half of the story, he already has a significant advantage. All he needs to do is adhere to the canon path, regardless of the circumstances. If he begins to interfere too much, he risks losing the only advantage he possesses. He recalls that the storyline takes a sudden dark turn during the 2nd semester of the 3rd year. This is when the demons discover that the hero has awakened and launch an attack on the academy, led by a legion commander. As the conflict intensifies, demons and humans plunge into an all-out war. From that point on, the game's narrative evolves into a classic fantasy novel. When he was playing it, he simply wanted to capture the carefree, uncomplicated youth he never had as a teenager. So, he deleted the game without hesitation. The issue is that he is now part of a world destined for war, and there is a genuine possibility that he could lose his life. He still has 3 years before that, but he needs to stop fleeing from reality and concentrate on what's possible. He won't allow himself to give up. Instead, he will focus on becoming stronger to ensure his survival. Moreover, cliché games like this one typically feature happy endings, where the protagonist successfully saves the world. All he requires is enough strength to defend himself. He can't allow himself to be a helpless weakling who gets killed off. He just needs to train sufficiently to protect himself while maintaining a low profile. To achieve this, he must reduce his reliance on the sword god's blessing, as even the few times he has used it have placed tremendous strain on his body. It's a powerful ability, but it has too many drawbacks for his liking. Reflecting on the blessing once more triggers a status window that provides him with information about it. Strangely, there are new entries in the information that he hadn't noticed before. The 3 new entries are body, mind, and armament grades, with the numbers next to them indicating levels. They all reflect his growth, and each will reduce the strain of his blessing on his body. There's also one more concept called synchronization, but he has no idea what it means, and its description consists of only question marks. He attempts to tap on it, however access is denied because he has not fulfilled the necessary conditions. That's another piece to this enigmatic blessing, but it's not a priority at the moment. His primary focus right now should be on enhancing his physical abilities and acquiring a new weapon. He cannot rely on the 30 seconds of the painless blessing indefinitely, so he also needs to learn how to wield a sword that doesn't depend on the blessing's conditions. Fortunately, there's a monster hunting training session for the midterms scheduled for next month. The reward for completing the training is the long sword Morsam. This B-tier weapon should serve him well until graduation. It's also too large for his blessing to activate, making it the ideal weapon for him. There's much to sort out, but he already seems to be making good progress. As he drifts in thought, a voice suddenly calls out to him. He looks up, and staring back at him is someone he never expected to see or speak to. It's Abel von Nibelung, the granddaughter of the Sword Emperor, and the one person he should avoid interacting with if he wants to prevent altering the game's narrative. She informs him that he's sitting in her seat, but he's too shocked to rise for a moment. She yells at him, until he finally understands and steps back to give her some space. He still can't believe how beautiful Abel is, and he found himself staring without even realizing it. As he attempts to leave, she tells him he doesn't have to go. He can simply shuffle over a bit instead. It's strange that she refers to a public bench as her seat, but he lets it slide since he doesn't want to get involved with her. He can't help but stare at her, and just as he expected from the game's heroine, she is truly stunning. Suddenly, she begins to speak, jolting Gielma back to the present. This is definitely quite strange, as the Abel he knows is typically standoffish and doesn't engage in conversation with others. Even the charming protagonist of the game couldn't win her over. She keeps talking, asking him if he also uses a blade as his weapon. He answers her shyly before inquiring how she knows. She shares with him that her grandfather once said that swordsmen have a distinct look in their eyes. She then presents her sword to him and asks if he would like to hold it. He's still feeling a bit uneasy about the situation, so he declines the offer. But that only makes her pout in annoyance. It seems he understands her feelings, yet he still struggles to get used to her talking to him. She then asks him if he recognizes her. Gielma is initially taken aback. It seems strange for her to ask such a question. Everyone at the school knows who she is. He responds to her in a vague manner, stating that he somewhat knows her. However, she then tells him that she doesn't know him. She finds it a bit unfair that he knows her while she has no idea who he is. Gielma disagrees, as they have only just met, making it unnecessary for them to know each other's names. She warns him that he might be a spy sent by the Demon King, infiltrating the academy disguised as a student. It's rather suspicious that he's out here alone at this late hour. Gielma then turns the question back to her, asking why she is out so late at night. It's clear from her attire and weapon that she has just completed her training and workout. She informs him that she practiced breathing exercises, gesturing toward him as she speaks. Unintentionally, she revealed the scars on her hands to Gioma. She quickly hides her hands, but Gioma has already noticed them. They bear the marks of her hard work. Abel agrees, as it's clear that she, more than anyone else, would be putting in the effort. People often misunderstand what it means to belong to the Nibelung bloodline. Members are expected to constantly perform at their best and to be flawless. A single misstep could turn them into a target. Abel then reveals that she is not the top student of the year, marking the first time she has ever lost to someone in her life. Yet, despite the reason to be upset, she feels oddly liberated. She can't help but wonder who exactly defeated her to become the top scorer. She would love to meet them so she can confront them. This causes Gioma to cough in shock. He asks her why she would go to such lengths. The reason is that she feels humiliated. She pleaded with her grandfather to reveal the person's identity, but it turns out they aren't even in her class. To make matters worse, they also skipped the speech, forcing her to deliver it in front of everyone, which only added to her embarrassment of finishing in second place. She catches herself before her rant goes any further. It's unusual for her to share so much with someone she just met. On that note, Gioma finally asks the question that's been on his mind. Why is she talking to him at all, given her personality and her typical feelings about others? The reason is certainly not what he anticipated. It's because he appears weak. Her family's motto is to be unyielding to the strong and merciful to the weak. With her classmates already being unbearable, she has no friends. This might explain why she is so cold toward the protagonist in the game. With that completed, Abel stretches lightly before getting ready to leave. As she rises, she takes a moment to pause. She then asks him if he truly isn't going to reveal his name. As before, Gioma refuses, leaving no room for negotiation. Time continues to pass. To Gioma's surprise, he continues his academic life without any issues. Chloe appears to have made some new friends besides him and has settled into the class well. Meanwhile, Gioma has been keeping himself occupied by avoiding her ever since the incident in her room. At times, when their eyes meet, her new friends regard him with disdain due to his status as a special entrant. However, Gioma has learned to disregard those who look down on him for this reason. After all, he's not the only unique entrant in their class. While there aren't many of them, they've all been quite adept at avoiding one another. Clearly, there's some sort of inferiority complex at work. However, Gioma is certain that things would be much worse if he were placed in a higher-tier class. By now, the students in the Star and Dragon classes have likely divided into factions and become entangled in petty power struggles. Even when he played the game, it was quite shocking to witness. But now that he's living in this world, just the thought of being part of it sends a shiver down his spine. On a positive note, he has been receiving proper meals now. That's thanks to a special privilege Medea granted him the other day for being the top scorer in the school. He receives a faculty card that grants him free access to any food he desires from the cafeteria. He's so grateful for this small gift that bowing to the director's office 3 times a day doesn't seem sufficient to convey his appreciation. Additionally, he has been performing his responsibilities as a student effectively, ensuring that he hasn't taken any actions that could adversely impact the main storyline. He just needs to maintain this for the next 3 years, and his life will run smoothly. The days pass by effortlessly. Gioma attends all his classes without any issues. In one of his classes, an elderly teacher shares the story of the hero Ballerwakin, who established the academy after realizing the importance of training the next generation of heroes. Gioma is already quite familiar with all of this from the games. The founding hero, Ballerwakin, confronted Lycan, the Demon King's right-hand man and the commander of the First Legion. The battle lasted for 20 years. In the end, the hero triumphed. However, Ballerwakin lost one of his arms as a consequence of his victory, rendering him unable to fight again. The war was marked by carnage and bloodshed. While the hero emerged victorious in battle, neither side could claim a definitive victory in the war. And just like that, the first human-demon war concluded with a truce. To train the next generation, Waken established the academy, and a non-aggression pact was signed between the two races. That pact is the reason for the 700 years of peace that continues to this day. The students are confident that they will not witness any war in their lifetime. However, Gioma is the only one aware that the peace will soon be shattered. Everyone has grown so accustomed to the tranquility by now, and it's hardly surprising. The only person he would want to warn about the impending doom is Medea, but doing so would change the established route, and he has no idea what consequences that might bring. Despite frequently expressing her desire to leave her role as academy director, Medea was among the first to sense that something was about to occur, thanks to her gift of perception. To protect her students, she was the first of the 7 stars to step onto the front lines, even though Gioma had never played the game to that extent. He learned of her fate by reading the game's fandom wiki. Medea was the first of the 7 stars to fall in battle against the Demon King's army. Knowing this makes it difficult to keep the war a secret, yet he wishes he had never learned about it in the first place. As the class ends, students begin to make their way to the school halls, drawn by a commotion happening outside. It seems that the time has finally come for things to begin. Gioma pauses to check his phone. Just as he suspected, it's the 5th of May. Today is the protagonist will finally join the school. He joins the group of students gathered at the classroom door, all of whom are in awe of him. Some are already convinced that he will join the star class. As he suspected, the game's protagonist strides through the halls, with people parting to make way for him. Leon van Reinhardt strides with a confident presence among his peers. However, Gioma understands that today marks the beginning of the end for the peace that has endured for 700 years. Gioma observes as everyone in the school appears to fawn over him, but he anticipated this reaction. After all, in the game, every woman seems to be drawn to him. If this were an adult-rated game, Leon would undoubtedly have met his demise before confronting the Demon King. Among all the women who seem drawn to him, those who become his party members are quite impressive as well. It's frustrating to consider, but Leon van Reinhardt, the protagonist of Miracle Blessing M, will likely be one of the first to be drafted in 3 years. Though he refers to it as a draft, it feels more like a compulsory enlistment. If Gioma is drafted too, it will mark his 2nd time in the army. However, the hero barely succeeded in sealing the 1st Legion commander, leaving Gioma to ponder just how powerful the Demon King truly is. There's no way the protagonist is going to lose, right? As he contemplates all of this, his eyes lock onto Leon. The protagonist smiles charmingly at him. It's as if he's reassuring Gioma, unaware of his thoughts. After all, he is the protagonist. There's no doubt he can handle these kinds of threats. As Gioma begins to walk away from the scene, he suddenly hears someone calling him from behind. It's Chloe, and she timidly asks if she did something wrong. He would love to tell her that she nearly cut off his head, but since they will be spending the next year together, he doesn't want to make things awkward between them. He claims there's no problem between them in an effort to maintain civility and avoid creating unnecessary enemies. Chloe appears relieved and has returned to her adorable self, a stark contrast to the murderous psychopath he encountered that day. Even in her unconscious state, he sensed that her swordsmanship was steeped in sorrow, as if the blade longed for salvation. Yet, the killing intent emanating from its edge was so powerful that it sent chills down his spine. If her swordsmanship is solely for the purpose of killing, she may be even more dangerous than the Mao siblings. He snaps back to reality when she asks if she can treat him to dinner again tonight. She wants to treat him, but she cautions that her cooking skills aren't as strong as his. The thought of having dinner with her again evokes memories of her bloodlust, making him instinctively want to refuse her. However, the puppy dog eyes of an adorable girl can be a formidable weapon. It's nearly impossible for him to say no to such an adorable face, and he feels guilty for even considering a refusal. However, if he doesn't decline, he might find himself waking up in a fridge tomorrow morning. Instead of dinner, he has a better idea for how they can spend time together. He asks her for a favor, explaining that she is the only one who can help him. This caused Chloe to become immediately docile. Gioma wants her to teach him swordsmanship, and he was in need of a sword instructor as well. Later, at the school's training grounds, he swings a wooden sword as he tests his own limits. As he anticipated, the size of the sword does not impact the blessing. Now, all he needs to do is work on developing his swordsmanship skills. Chloe is incredibly strong and would be the ideal person to train him. This also serves as a solid excuse for him to skip dinner with her again. Ever since that day, he has made it a point to watch a video titled "Surviving a Yonder" before going to bed. Somehow, it seems to have helped him cope with Chloe for the time being. Chloe approaches him dressed casually, her katana secured at her hip. He just arrived, as they plan to meet at 8, but she has been waiting for him since 6. Yomei takes a moment to admire her, appreciating the view of her muscles, accentuated by her crop top. He hadn't noticed it before since he had only ever seen her in a school uniform, but that would explain her remarkable strength. He hands her another wooden sword. Chloe is puzzled that they aren't using real swords. They can't train with real swords, and they're certainly not fighting for their lives, so there's no need for them to use actual weapons. Chloe happily accepts the wooden sword from him. She tests her swing, and the force of her sword thrust generates a small shockwave that ripples between them. Her strength is such that the air around them quivers from the impact of that strike. Joma begins to have second thoughts about asking her to train him. For now, he decides to err on the side of caution. Before their training begins, he decides to check his blessing one last time. Fortunately, the sword's length isn't a problem, and his body has been growing steadily. However, upon reflection, he finds it strange that a blessing would enhance with experience. He can't recall if blessings also bring additional side effects. He also has no idea how much more he needs to grow before the mysterious hidden trait emerges. Chloe approaches him and asks what's wrong. He is reminded that only he can view his status screen. To her, he probably appeared to be a crazy guy lost in thought. He turns to begin their training and nervously asks Chloe to take it easy on him, as it's their first day. He prepares himself with his sword and turns to face Chloe. In his previous life, he gained knowledge entirely through hands-on experience. He firmly believes that to truly master something, you can't merely give a part of yourself. You must be willing to sacrifice your entire being. He adapted quickly in the academy due to the training he received in his class. From a young age, he learned to recognize when he was growing and when he was stagnant. Even now, he can sense that his stance and grip on the sword aren't quite perfect. Nevertheless, despite all of that, the final stroke of the sword must always land on the opponent. He opens his eyes, ready to begin the duel. He sees Chloe charging toward him at full speed. He hardly has time to evade her initial strike as Chloe shifts her stance and launches another attack, which he can barely parry. Somehow, as the fight progresses, she appears to be getting faster, and Gioma struggles to keep up with her pace. Moreover, she may even be holding back. Since he asked her to take it easy on him, her sword clashes with his once more. This time, the wood starts to crack under the pressure. Her relentless barrage of attacks doesn't let up. She continues to strike while he struggles to parry and dodge. Given the force she's using, if he gets hit by even one of her attacks, he could actually die, and he can't find any openings to counterattack. Before he can even devise a counterattack, his sword finally gives out and breaks in half. Chloe attempts to apologize, explaining that she was as gentle as possible, yet she still ended up breaking it. However, that's the least of her concerns. Because the sword has decreased in size and length, it unfortunately meets the conditions for the sword god blessing to activate. However, something is seriously amiss. The weapon has been damaged, leading to a system error. Instead of restraining the full power of the blessing, the suppressive force begins to alter Gioma's personality. By the time the alteration is complete, Gioma's humanity level has diminished, transforming him into a mere fighting shell. The sword god's divine blessing fully activates as Gioma faces her, wielding his half-broken wooden sword, a menacing aura enveloping him. Chloe takes a step back as Gamma's demeanor noticeably shifts. Although Gioma's body appears to operate on autopilot, inside Gioma's mind, he has returned to his former self. He finds himself in his kitchen, and everything feels like a dream. At the moment, all he can think about is cleaning and cutting the fish in front of him. He can't recall what he was doing before this, but right now, he knows he just needs to get back to work. It's been a while since he worked on a fish like this, so he decides to use a Chinese cleaver for the task. As he attempts to pick it up, a message appears, notifying him that he cannot do so. Since that approach isn't working, he attempts to pick up the knife again. However, a message appears, informing him that he still can't pick it up. The only option left is the sashimi knife, which is the only blade the system permits him to take. Yet, he recalls that holding the sashimi knife will cause him pain. However, he picks it up and finds it completely fine. In fact, he feels refreshed if anything. A voice in his head urges him to accept the situation and let it go. In reality, Gioma continues to advance toward Chloe with the knife. She attempts to call out to him, Yet he keeps walking toward her, his bloodlust evident. Suddenly, he dashes toward her. Chloe barely manages to block his attack with her sword. He presses against her sword and sends her flying backward, crashing into a wall. He suddenly feels entirely different from how he felt during their earlier sparring session. He leaps toward her, attempting to stab her with the sharp end of his stake. However, she barely jumps back and manages to avoid the hit. Chloe was struck by just one attack, yet she can hardly move. She can't understand how Gioma suddenly became like this, but she needs to find a way to halt the spar before he accidentally kills her. She attempts to ask him once more to stop. However, Gioma remains unresponsive and charges at her once more. He's moving so quickly that there's no way she can avoid it in her current condition. All she can do is keep begging him to stop. In that moment, she calls out his name just as the sword comes crashing down toward her head. In Gioma's dream world, he wonders why the fish he has been trying to catch keeps evading him. The fish appears to be making a lot of noise while bouncing around, and he can just barely understand what it's saying. It seems like it's calling out a name. The sound gradually clears until he can barely hear the fish calling for someone named Gioma. Chef Kim's mind begins to clear, and he eventually realizes that he is Gioma and the fish is calling out to him. He can hardly recognize what is right. Just as he is about to stab Chloe with the shattered sword, just before the wood can pierce her skin, Gioma hurls the sword away, slamming it into a wall. Just before he accidentally injures his friend, Chloe opens her eyes to find Gamma smiling down at her, no longer holding the sword. The blessing has ended and he has returned to his senses. Chloe nervously inquires if he is okay. He calmly assures her that he's fine, then turns to leave, thanking her for helping him train. After he leaves, Chloe heads back to her dorm room. Since the entrance exam, she sensed that Gioma's abilities are more unusual than powerful. When she fought him, she realized he wasn't using skill. He was relying solely on raw instinct. Although he had subconsciously activated his divine blessing, she was no match for him. Despite wielding only a half-wooden sword, he completely overpowered her. As she strolls across the campus, someone emerges from the shadows and remarks that Chloe appears quite content. The mysterious newcomer is Nox Aditor, Chloe's older brother. He mocks her for associating with someone he considers beneath her after she joined the academy. Chloe realizes he is referring to Gioma and warns him not to speak about her friend in that manner. Nox didn't even know his name until now, but he warns Chloe to avoid lingering around him unless the Aviator family plans to erase him. Chloe turns and walks away, telling Nox that even if the Aviator arrives, they will be no match for Gioma. As Chloe walks away, Nox reflects on the guy who has changed his sister so profoundly. As Gioma walks home, he takes a moment to reflect on his blessing. The power he possesses feels less like a divine favor and more like a curse. To avoid depending on the sword god's blessing, he sought out new weapons, yet that power pursued him, and even took control of his body, as if to mock his attempts to avoid relying on it. When he fought Chloe, he felt no pain. Instead, he experienced a sense of pleasure, as if he were intoxicated. Like a curse, the blessing manipulated him like a puppet, whispering sweet words in his ear, urging him to slash, cut, and destroy. As a result, he relinquished his body until Chloe's screams pulled him from his daze. In that moment, he suddenly recalled his own name and returned to reality. Thanks to that, he regained consciousness just long enough to toss aside the wooden sword, fearing he would lose more of himself forever if he didn't dispose of it quickly. It's amusing to consider that Chloe, a yandere who nearly killed him not long ago, is now the girl who pulled him out of his daze. He was frustrated that she had broken the sword initially, but ultimately, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. That's why he didn't create a scene when he returned to reality. He was afraid of triggering the sword god's blessing once more. Today proves that he cannot simply ignore this issue for the rest of his life. This gift is something he must confront continually, and it is the reason his desire for a normal life will likely remain unfulfilled. As he slowly makes his way back to his room, Gyoma recognizes that something within him is attempting to consume his sense of reason. This is certainly not a blessing. It's a curse that seeks to consume him entirely. 3 days later, classes resume as usual. Chloe chats with her new friends. However, something is clearly amiss. Since their duel, Gyoma has not been attending class. They never shared their contact information, so she hasn't been able to check on him. Each time she visited his dorm, all she heard in response to her knocks were pained groans. She thought about breaking down the door, but worried he might end up resenting her for it. She enjoys watching him from her seat during class. She lost count of how many times she secretly glanced at him throughout the day. Initially, she believed her attraction to him stemmed from his willingness to risk his life for her, but that now seems like just an excuse. Whatever the reason for her current attraction to him, she simply misses him. The next day, Gyoma still hasn't arrived for class, even as the teacher is shouting at everyone to settle down and be quiet. It's raining today, so the teacher informs them that they will have study hall instead of training. As the students begin to take their seats, he notices that Gyoma has been absent for several days. However, knowing him, there must be a reason for it. Therefore, the instructor decides to wait patiently for Gyoma to return on his own. As he disciplines his students, the classroom doors creak open. Gyoma confidently strides in with a completely new appearance. Chloe rises from her seat in shock. Gyoma apologizes to the instructor for arriving late to class. His eyes are sunken and appear almost lifeless, while a strand of hair on his head has turned a pale white. Even the instructor is somewhat taken aback by Gyoma's new look, much like the other students, and he nervously instructs Gyoma to take a seat. The students note that Gyoma appears different and strangely more handsome. By the end of the day, the other students leave the classroom to attend to their own activities. Chloe approaches Gyoma for the first time in 4 days. She anxiously asks him what happened and why he hadn't shown up for so long. He remains silent for a moment, before telling her that he was feeling a bit unwell and that she shouldn't worry about him. From her shaky voice, he realizes she doesn't fully believe him, but there's nothing more he can do to convince her. For the past 3 days, he experienced symptoms akin to severe withdrawal, leaving him mentally drained. He couldn't leave his room or eat anything, so he just buried himself in his bed, praying for his convulsions to subside. The pain he endured during this period was far greater than before, all a consequence of using the broken weapon. Additionally, when he looked in the mirror, his appearance may have seemed unchanged, but his expression was noticeably more hollow, and his hair appeared to be turning white. This was clearly a penalty imposed by the sword god. Chloe appears guilty, likely because the last time she saw him was at the training grounds. She probably believes this is somehow her fault. To soothe her, he asks if she still wants to have dinner with him as she had expressed earlier. That surprises Chloe even more than his return to class. She nearly rushes to him for a hug. It appears that was the right choice, as she seemed to genuinely appreciate the suggestion. She then asks him what he would like to eat. The first thing that comes to his mind is fish. As they converse, a peculiar sensation washes over him. He turns to see someone watching them from the end of the hall. It's Nox, Chloe's brother. The atmosphere shifts the moment they catch sight of him. Gyoma approaches the newcomer directly and tells him that instead of staring, he should come in and join the conversation. Immediately, Gyoma notices something off about the man's eyes. However, Chloe intervenes before anything crazy occurs. Her voice trembles, and there's a noticeable hesitation in her behavior, yet she continues to protect him in her own way. Nox asks Chloe if this is truly the guy she's willing to break the rules of authority for. Chloe expresses her desire to distance herself from her family, but her brother reminds her that she can't simply wash the blood off her hands. Once someone is born an auditor, they will always remain an auditor. Chloe speaks like a rebel, while her brother sounds as if he's in a historical drama. Meanwhile, Gyoma is simply annoyed by the entire situation. Nox continues to belittle Gyoma. This finally causes Chloe to snap. She shouts at Nox to stop speaking about the man she loves in that way, and her fierce tone even surprises him. Gyoma hoped that this situation could be managed in moderation, but he's beginning to adapt to these disruptions in his life. The more pressing concern is the auditor. He understands that they are a clandestine group specializing in assassination, and they emerge in the midst of the game to play a significant role. While they may be considered weaker than other heroic houses, they excel in assassination. All members of the Auditor clan are incredibly strong thanks to their rigorous training regimen that begins in childhood, shaping them into highly skilled assassination tools. If Chloe is part of this assassination group, then her cute and bubbly personality makes her the unusual one in this scenario. In contrast to her brother, Nox has an expression that reveals his familiarity with killing. While Gioma has no objections to that, it seems Chloe prefers to lead a more conventional life. Similar to his blessing of the sword god, Chloe had no control over her involvement in the Auditor's environment. She is destined to lead a life as an emotionless murderer, which is quite unfortunate to consider. Gioma doesn't see himself as a hero and has no desire to become one. Even if he can't save the world, he can at least attempt to save one girl's life. He steps between Chloe and her brother, confronting Nox directly. In the end, he attempted to escape the sword god's blessing, but he couldn't. Instead, he decided to move forward and embrace this curse. After all, the name Gioma translates to sword demon. With that, he strides past the two assassin siblings and instructs Nox to follow him. Meanwhile, Li Wanbin sits in his office, his thoughts occupied by his student. When Gioma arrived in class that morning, it was clear that something was troubling him. His expression was emotionless, and he appeared deeply distressed. While he is lost in thought, one of his fellow instructors cheerfully walks into the room, while also commenting on the man's baldness. Before they can continue their conversation, Li Wanbin receives a call from the administrators requesting his permission for one of his students to use the subspace. Li Wanbin urgently inquires about which of his cadets suddenly requested to use the subspace. They confirm that it was Kang Gyoma who made the request, hoping to confront Nox's auditory. The stage is set for the battle between Gyoma and Nox. Our MC waits patiently in the room with 15 minutes remaining before the fight begins. He expected the process of gaining access to the subspace to be complicated, but it turned out to be quite swift. It's certainly due to Medea, who at least wanted him to be safe while facing a professional assassin. At least since he won't be fighting in reality, he doesn't have to worry about physical injuries. However, there's still a significant chance he could experience mental ones. Nonetheless, none of that matters as long as he can win. I can hear all the noise from the arena while waiting in the room, and it seems the fight between the two students has generated some unexpected excitement. It's almost ironic that he was once trying so hard to blend in, but now that effort feels pointless. Beside him, Chloe is nearly overwhelmed by grief and guilt. She's likely blaming herself for the entire situation. Gioma attempts to reassure her that it truly isn't her fault. She even lent him some gear, so everything will work out in the end. She tells him that Nox is incredibly strong and possesses unmatched talent, making him a genius in the entire history of the Auditor family. When it comes to the dark arts, no one compares to his level, and by the age of 14, he was already recognized as the pinnacle of the dark arts. That's a rather cringeworthy name, but it certainly highlights his strength. Gioma gazes at the rose-colored blade in his hand, reflecting on the choices that brought him to this moment. His former teacher often told him that he was destined to wield a blade for his entire life. He never anticipated that he would still be running around with a sashimi knife, even in his next reincarnation. An announcement echoes over the speaker, notifying the students that the subspace battle is about to commence. He stands up to exit the locker room, but not before reassuring Chloe once more that he will win. He steps into the arena. He is immediately greeted by the enthusiastic cheers of his fellow students. Gioma feels like a gladiator from the Roman Empire, given the intensity of the atmosphere. In the distance, he can also see that the entire star class will also be in attendance, including the main cast of characters from the game. Nox walks into the AS well and immediately captures everyone's attention. The assassin seems offended that Gioma would have the audacity to challenge him with a delicate kitchen knife. This guy's killing intent is concerning, so it would be wise for Gioma to avoid provoking him. Naturally, Gioma further taunts him by stating that a true master never blames their equipment. Nox draws his blade, an S-rank sword known as the Two Hungarian Blades. In addition to this formidable weapon, he possesses one of the game's finest auras, the Blessing of the Crow. However, Gioma has come equipped with dual discount-grade kitchen knives. This is sure to be a battle for the ages. The subspace barrier has been deployed. Before it is even fully active, the two students leap at each other. Gyoma activates the painless blessing as he uncovers the two knives, triggering the sword god's blessing. The spectators in the stands watch in awe, struggling to see anything happening in the arena. This was meant to be an easy match, where a special admission student would be easily defeated by a skilled assassin. However, given how quickly the two of them are moving, the students struggle to keep up with what's happening. The students in the star class are equally surprised by how captivating this fight has suddenly become, especially Abel, who cannot believe that the person she considered weak possesses such fighting prowess. Their swords clash repeatedly as Gyoma effortlessly dodges all of Nox's strikes. Frustrated, the assassin launches another attack. It's so fast that it creates 3 after-images of him. Despite the attack striking Gyoma directly, he still manages to emerge from it unscathed. The observing students are praising Nox's strength and speed, viewing the battle as Gyoma evading every attack. But Abel knows a truth that others cannot perceive. Only those who can clearly observe the match will grasp what's unfolding. Somehow, Gyoma is effortlessly dodging every one of Nox's attacks, as if he isn't even trying to fight. Meanwhile, Nox grew increasingly agitated, having used his blessing of the crow, believing it would be sufficient to annihilate Gyoma. However, Gyoma somehow handled everything, as if it were effortless. Having witnessed Gyama's impressive skills firsthand, Nox resolves to be more cautious and aims for a powerful strike capable of slicing through a wide area in one swift motion. Gyoma suddenly drops the sashimi knife he brought with him. He holds the rosy blade that Chloe gave him. Simply observing the confidence in his stance only fuels Nox's anger further. He believes that someone like Gyoma, who he considers a nobody, shouldn't have the audacity to act like a big shot. As Gyoma charges his attack, Nox simultaneously unleashes a powerful strike aimed directly at our main character. Before he can even make a move, Gyoma takes the offensive. In an instant, the match is decided. Gyoma aspired to a comfortable life, so he adhered to the rules and made an effort to blend in. Now, he has surrendered his body to the sword god with a singular purpose, of cutting Nox so cleanly that he wouldn't even notice he had been cut. The entire crowd falls eerily silent. Nox's arm, still gripping one of his blades, soars through the air before falling limply to the ground. This marks the beginning of Kang Gyoma's origin, the moment he bids farewell to his tranquil future. Gyoma turns around and completes the task, slicing Nox into pieces and officially ending the battle. The subspace barrier is disabled. The crowd remains in stunned silence. Nox struggles to catch his breath, resting his arms on the floor. Meanwhile, Gyoma sheaths his blade as the announcer proclaims him the winner of the match. Gyoma isn't surprised that the crowd can't even muster a cheer. He displayed astonishing strength unexpectedly, wielding a knife designed for gutting fish. Despite his strength, he still finds the idea of cutting someone to be quite unpleasant. The only consolation he has is that both the Mao brothers and Nox were in subspace during their fight, so he wasn't truly killing anyone. Nox is still trying to catch his breath on the ground. Gyoma can't help but admire the man. He is just as strong as Chloe described, possessing an incredible battle sense refined through experience, yet anyone would easily perceive his intentions through his palpable killing intent. The announcer reiterates that Kang Gyoma has won the duel. This seems to be enough to jolt everyone out of their daze, as the arena erupts with cheers and disbelief that a first-year special admission student has defeated a sophomore. Gyoma's tranquil, unremarkable life has officially come to an end. But this is the path he chose. Now that things have reached this point, he must simply endure with unwavering will and determination. Even the next day, people are still discussing the duel between the first and second years. In the star class, Abel gazes out the window, preoccupied with thoughts of a student who has been on her mind constantly. As a result of the duel, his name now trails her wherever she goes, making it seem as though he is the only topic of conversation. Upon seeing it, she too couldn't believe her eyes. At that moment, he displayed remarkable swordsmanship, wielding just 2 kitchen knives. Watching his mastery of the blade has left her feeling almost hopelessly naive, for believing she was proficient with a sword. In fact, she is certain that he was the top student her grandfather had kept a secret from her. That only adds to her frustration, since she spoke to him as if he were weak, even though he was actually stronger than she was. Her loud irritation is enough to rouse her seatmate. Rachel apologizes to her friend. However, Rachel can instantly sense that something is deeply troubling Abel. The blue-haired girl attempts to brush it off, claiming she's frustrated due to not being able to work out lately. However, Rachel can see right through her facade. She makes a few guesses to determine what might be troubling Abel. She hits the nail on the head when she suggests that it could be boy trouble. Rachel bursts into uninhibited laughter at the mere thought of Lady Abel being interested in romance. Throughout the conversation, Abel attempts to persuade her friend that it isn't what she believes it to be. Rachel dismisses her and redirects her attention to uncovering which man has left her dear friend so flustered. She goes through the list of options, beginning with Leon, the standout student known for his handsome looks. However, Abel's deadpan reaction to the mention of that idea clearly indicates that it's not him. This leaves only one option, the special student from yesterday's duel, who astonished the entire school with his strength. Once more, Abel freezes, unable to outright deny it. This includes all the information Rachel requires. She immediately grabs Rachel's hand and pulls her to the Tiger class to meet the boy who has been on everyone's mind. The two of them burst into Tiger class, with Abel reluctantly trailing behind her friend. The entire class freezes in shock as the two school beauties walk through. Rachel stands on a target. However, someone attempts to reprimand her for suddenly jumping onto another student's seat. She can completely confuse him by flaunting her beauty. Abel can only hang her head in embarrassment at her friend's behavior. Eventually, she discovers Gioma sleeping at his desk while Chloe admires him. Initially, Rachel confuses Chloe for his girlfriend, but that doesn't bother her. In fact, it adds to the excitement of the situation. She approaches Gioma and gently blows air into his ear. This surprises both Abel and Chloe. As he gradually awakens, she perches on his desk with a playful smile and asks for his name. Gioma already knows who she is, and he isn't thrilled to suddenly encounter another heroine from the game. She leans in and pokes Gioma's face with her finger, complimenting his looks, while he stares at her in shock. He has no idea what's happening, but his instincts are screaming that this entire situation is perilous. Suddenly, Chloe, looking very angry, grabs the hand that Rachel was about to use to poke Gioma. Chloe insists on knowing what Rachel believes she is doing. However, Rachel finds her anger and murderous intent amusing. It seems that Gioma's instincts were alerting him to the danger posed by Chloe. Her personality has completely transformed as she pulls a box cutter from the distant pocket dimension. If a knife fight erupts in the classroom, it could lead to significant issues for him later on. This is a combination he has never encountered in the game before, leaving him to wonder why it's happening all of a sudden. Abel enters and attempts to pull her friend away from the situation, particularly since this isn't even their classroom. However, Rachel remains firm. She insists that she's only here to say hello. Then, as if to add insult to injury, she places a hand on Chloe's head and tells her that she shouldn't interrupt when adults are speaking. This only angers Chloe further as she opens the box cutter, ready to strike. Gioma and Abel watch in disbelief as Chloe attempts to stab Rachel. However, her hand is quickly seized by the much stronger girl. At this moment, she's merely provoking Chloe into a fight for no reason. Abel yells at her once more to stop what she's doing before something bad occurs. Rachel frowns and swiftly pushes Chloe aside like a piece of paper, but Chloe manages to catch herself before hitting the ground. The boys in class erupted in joyful screams at the unfolding catfight, while Gioma felt more annoyed than anything by the bizarre spectacle before him. Rachel then activates her blessing, rooted in the traditions of her clan, the clan of the Spear Saint. This clan holds the belief that skills are ineffective against overwhelming strength, asserting that brute force prevails above all. Rachel Demora, the niece of the Spear Saint, shares this same conviction. She straightforwardly asks Gioma if Chloe is her girlfriend, and our MC doesn't hesitate to say no. This causes Chloe's aggression to briefly shift toward him. He clarifies that she is merely a friend, which seems to pique Rachel's interest even further in the situation. Meanwhile, Gioma is still trying to understand what this entire situation is all about. Now that he's more alert and has the opportunity to look around, he finally spots Abel, who appears just as frazzled as he was not long ago. He gets straight to the point and asks why the two of them are searching for him. Rachel explains that Abel was interested in him and wanted to see his face. Abel shouts that her accusations are completely false, insisting that it was Rachel who practically dragged her there. Rachel believed that Abel genuinely wanted to see her, as she followed her to the tiger class. As the whole class focuses on her, she attempts to explain shyly that there was a misunderstanding. But now, Gioma simply wants them to go. He tells them this directly. This surprises the two girls, and Rachel can hardly contain her laughter. This only heightens her interest in Gioma, as she is drawn to intriguing individuals. She invites him to her dorm room after class to engage in some wild activities together. That's the last straw for Chloe. She shouts for Rachel to step away from her Gioma immediately. Rachel attempts to mock her once more. But Abel has reached her limit. Even she struggles to contain her anger at Rachel's flirting. Sensing that things were getting out of hand, Rachel finally backed off, but not before telling Gioma that she'd see him later. He quickly refused, insisting that she shouldn't come back. The two girls finally exit the classroom. Gioma quickly falls back asleep as Chloe hurries to check on him. No one notices Abel pause for a moment to gaze longingly at Gioma before leaving. Abel and Rachel resume their walk back to class. Rachel can't shake off how impressed she was by Gioma's attitude. It's one thing to be cold, but from his hollow eyes, Rachel sensed a subtle underlying feeling that she might get her throat cut if she continued to provoke him like that. She was simply curious about him, but he exceeded her expectations and truly gave her chills. From what little she could see, she could already tell that he was a cut above the style-over-substance students prevalent in the star class. Her clan is relentless in their pursuit of the finest warriors for betrothal, and in a way, he might just be a valuable asset she wouldn't want to lose. Rachel suddenly turns around and apologizes to Abel. Abel, however, believes she owes an apology to the students of Tiger Class for the scene she created. However, that's not what Rachel intended. She's apologizing about Kang Gioma because, moving forward, she won't back down now that she's interested in him. Elsewhere in the school clinic, Nox storms through the halls, consumed by thoughts of killing Gamma. He has lived his entire life undefeated, earning the title of Auditor Genius. Now, however, someone has managed to defeat him using nothing but kitchen knives. The mere thought of Gioma's face infuriates him to an exceptional extent. If necessary, he will summon the full strength of his clan to behead Gioma. Once he eliminates RMC, he will reclaim Chloe. Chloe has the potential to become just as great, if not greater, than him, and he won't allow some random special admissions nobody to take her away. All he needs to do is summon the power of his clan to strike, and they will reveal their strength to him. At least, that's how it was supposed to go. Yet, it is the same Gioma that he has been relentlessly scheming to eliminate. He sits calmly in his clinic room, enjoying an apple.